Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to kick this collaboration off. We're super excited to be doing this. And, actually, we met Shachi a year ago at a panel discussion that she was a part of in Chennai. And we've been trying to do something meaningful, like with the foundation since then. And personally, like all of us are very, very excited for this. And thank you so much for taking out the time. Um, this collaboration brings together the spirit of the Biennale and the vision of a modern Indian mindful brand that Nicobar envisions to be. So join us as we celebrate this intersection of modernity, storytelling, photography, and I hope you have a lot of fun and an insightful panel talk. And I'm going to hand it over to Gayatri now, and we'll just kick off. Can I just request everyone to please put their phones on silent or switch them off preferably? Whatever works. Right.
Thank you, Snigdha, and thank you to Nicobar for hosting these conversations. Good afternoon, evening, everyone. Nice to see a lot of you here. And so clearly not everyone's afraid of the arts. I'm Gayatri. I'm one of the co-founders of the Chennai Photo Biennale. And along with Nicobar, we're hosting a series of conversations at different Nicobar stores across the country. So stay tuned on our Instagram. But I thought that I will start with a quick audience poll. How many people here are in the arts or creative industry here? Wow. Okay, good. Good to know. Yeah. So actually, we're kind of we're in our bubble again, but it's fine. So quick question. So how many of you have ever been asked, what is your real job? Okay. And in school, what was your experience of the art class? Did you love it? Did you avoid it? You were scared of it? Or what is art class? What was it? Was it A, B, or C? Loved it? Who's A? Okay. Who's B? Avoided it? And C, what is art class? Okay. And if you put yourself in in a family scenario, you want to tell your family that you want to pursue a career in the arts, how do they react? Is it A, amazing, follow your dreams? Is it B, okay, but maybe have a backup plan, right? Is it C, beta, please, MBA or IS? And D, you don't even ask them, you already know the answer. So is it A? How many A's? Wow, okay, lovely. B's, okay, beta, have a backup plan. And C, beta, please, MBA, IS. I'm one of those, did engineering. And didn't even try. Already know the answer. Okay, cool. So that was a little icebreaker to get us started. So our panel today asks the big question: who's afraid of the arts? Judging by school curriculums, arts funding, and the occasional skeptical parent, the answer seems to be quite a few people. The arts are often treated like the eccentric relative at a family gathering, nice to have around, but not entirely taken seriously. We hear all the time, art doesn't pay. It's just a hobby. But what's your real job? And yet, arts is everywhere, in the films we watch, the music we listen to, the books we read, and even the way we tell stories. So why does the idea of putting art at the center of education, public spaces, and careers still make people nervous? That's exactly why we're here to explore. We have an incredible panel of artists, educators, and creative thinkers who challenge these fears in their own work. So let's get started, and who knows, by the end of this conversation, we might just convince, well, not all of you, but some others, that the arts are not scary. So I'm going to start with a quick introduction to myself and my organization. I think some of you might already know CPB, but we are a non-profit trust based in Chennai. We have a public arts festival happening every 2 years based around photography and lens-based arts. We also do education programs. Sorry, I'm just going to pause this. We have school education programs, college education programs. We do artist residencies, grants, etc. And we do a festival every 2 years. We work with a lot of students, teachers, schools, and we've also had a lot of student exhibitions over the last 8 years that we've been doing this. And I think for me personally, education is the kind of the core of what I do at the foundation, which has also brought me together with Sananda and I have worked together in the past in the education space. Mostly that's my focus. So as we go around in the conversation, I will talk a little bit about that. And why photography? I think for us, we feel that photography, even though it's very screen-based now because of the mobile phone, we still feel like it connects you with the outdoors, with nature. It also is a great bridge between technology and children, especially, we notice really like working with photography because it's a toy in their hands that they can explore. And we've also noticed that it empowers children or whoever has the camera in their hand to be change makers, to be storytellers of their community. That's me in a nutshell. I will hand over to Zara, but Zara, I will introduce you first, right? Yes. So Zara Amiruddin is an independent writer, photographer, and educator who has been working in the field for over a decade and specializes in visual practice and contemporary art. She's been published by the Al-Qazi Foundation, Vogue, Hindu, and Art India magazine, and has exhibited her work in India, Greece, South Korea, and Cambodia. She is also part of 830, a photography collective with 9 women collaborating across the country. So maybe you'll tell us a little bit more about this collective as we go along. So over to you, Zara. Let me know what slides you want me to play. Okay. Do we use all these mics? Since we all have mics. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I thought that maybe it would be interesting to start off by talking about something that I have learned over time with photography is that, well, firstly, my introduction to photography started off when I was in college and I was studying Bachelor's of Mass Media, and I had a photography professor who actually I didn't like very much. And I felt like a lot of it was the focus on the technical driven aspect of photography. And I also felt like essentially we were given a list of photographers and then we had to study their history. And at that point of time, I felt like that's not something that I was interested in because sure, reading a photograph versus mugging somebody's historic biography is a completely different experience. But really, it opened up when we were given free rein during our assignment. We were told that, you can go off and do whatever you like and you can make a photo narrative of 20 photographs. And at that point of time, we weren't really taught what a photo narrative is. But I went off and I had like these little pink chappals that I would wear everywhere. And I was obsessed with Bombay, as I still am. And it was my way of exploring the city through these pink chappals. And I realized that the thing that I carried within me was the feeling of when I was photographing, when I was pressing the shutter, I had butterflies in my stomach. And I also felt a sense of complete freedom. I felt like I could do anything, and it sounds like a bit dramatic, but I really, truly felt that. Cut to, you can switch. Cut to, I went off to study on this magical island called Paros in Greece. And my teacher there, we didn't study anything about the technicals of photography. We were just going around and... Is it play? Yeah, I can play. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we were talking about... We were grabbing olives from the olive trees and we were going on treks and we were smelling the Aegean and we were touching the sand and then I was going and making my photographs when I realized that was really kind of entering my photographs in a way. And funnily enough, completely coincidentally, last night I was watching Mona Lisa Smile for the first time, Julia Roberts, and she's an art history professor, and she said when she was talking about Van Gogh's artistic practice, she said he painted what he felt, not what he saw. And I think that's pretty much what my photographic practice has been all this while. And I think that's something that I'm very much interested in also inculcating in my own classrooms is how do you photograph through feeling? What does this make you feel? What is it not as a single image, but as a whole story? So yeah, I mean, that's something that we can talk about through this conversation, but I thought it would be something nice to think about even as we go along. Yeah.
Thank you. Sananda, over to you. I think you said that you would... can we do Nandini now? Because I just realized my slides are like that.
Should it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to read out your bio? Or do you want to just introduce yourself?
You could.
Okay, I could do it. Okay. So Nandini is a documentary filmmaker, educator, and co-founder of Nazaria Arts Collective, an organization actually I have been following for a while. So over the 6 years, she's harnessed arts and media to advocate for various social justice causes, including working with organizations such as UNICEF, Their World, and Romeo, among others. Romia, sorry. Through Nazaria, she's dedicated to enabling access to high-quality multimedia arts education to marginalized youth across India. Nandini has been a Dalai Lama Fellow, a Teach for India Fellow, and holds an MSc in Social Anthropology from the University of Oxford. Welcome, Nandini. Over to you.
Thank you. So lovely to be here. I want to talk less about my own practice and more about Nazaria, which in many ways is a big part of my practice. Nazaria began when I was a grade 10 teacher in a BMC school to 120 10th graders. And as I was teaching English and political science, I saw and I felt in myself and in them a lot of angst and restlessness because of the sheer absence of spaces for creative expression in these schools. I noticed that kids from grade 1 to 8 still had some like mediocre art class going on in which they were painting and drawing. But from grade 9 and up, it was just decided that you just ought to focus on academics. At the same time, I saw my students questioning the world around them and having no space to really like make meaning of the world. And so that's kind of what led us to start Nazaria Arts Collective. We can stay on this slide for now. And yeah, at Nazaria over the past 3 years, we've been developing what we call a social justice arts curriculum because our work is at the intersection of multimedia arts education, media democracy, and social justice. In a much more simplified way, what we try to do through the arts and media is 4 things. The first is focus on identity. So this photograph was taken by one of our youth artists, Ikra. We often say that she reminds us that you can be shy and loud at the same time. She would never really speak up in the beginning, was very reserved. But through her art and through making zines, she started to express herself and have her voice heard. And she recently directed her own short film called Hijabi Hacker. And I think the name itself is quite telling us what a feisty young lady she's come to be. Could we go to the slide before? Yeah. This photograph was taken by one of our youth, Yazdan. Whoops.
No, it's going to appear.
Okay, we'll give it a second, but I'll still keep going. So Yazdan was a notorious backbencher at school, a nightmare for most teachers, would never really behave, was on the verge of dropping out. At Nazaria, he shines. I think he had an angst in him that he was able to release. And since then, he's made rap videos and documentaries about different social issues that he cares about. And I think through that, we've been able to explore how arts can enable young people to build their voice and agency. So Avaz is the second tenet of our curriculum. The third is Nazaria. This photograph was taken during a photo assignment that we did as part of a film program by one of our youth artists, Sanya. She used like a grater to take this photo with her sister. It was all about like how can you explore lighting through like jugaad methods. And Sanya is really committed to changing perceptions of Muslim women and girls in media. And so another tenet of our work is having young people think about whose gaze dominates, who is seen and unseen, and how can they start to shift perspectives through their art. The last tenant of our curriculum is called Badlav. This photograph was taken by one of our earliest youth artists, Mehak, who is not only exploring her own creativity as a budding storyteller, but is now starting to pass it on to other young people. So in our community-run Kahani Lab, which is like a media lab where we run these trainings, she's now starting to teach other kids photography and the arts. And so, I think what we're really interested in seeing is what all can art be and do for youth at the margins of society.
Thank you, Nandini. Over to Saranda. Sarah. So I'm introducing myself. And we can okay. So I'm an arts-based educator. I'm based in Mumbai, and I make theatre. Currently, and over the last decade, I only make theatre for the youngest human beings. So I work with natural material, and I make theatre for 0 to 5-year-olds. I'd like you to bear that in mind, because I'm going to take you through a little bit of the journey that I have been on, and a lot of what I have to say about who is afraid of the arts sort of comes from there. I trained in dance as a young person. All of my growing up impressionable years were in a rehearsal room. It was after school. It was taking time off if you needed to go to a festival, which meant that I had adults in my life who held space for me to pursue a passion, even as an quote unquote, you don't know what you want for yourself human being. I had wonderful teachers who told stories beyond technique. It was a space to figure out how you can perhaps become an artist. And I went to a tremendously oppressive school setting where every single person that I graduated with, actually 3 of us who chose the arts, commerce, and something else, but the rest of the 649 or something like that students, they all did engineering. Most of them are in America with their MS and all of that. So I went to a tremendously oppressive setting. I say this because I loved art class, except it was possibly the only thing I was good at. So you grow up as a young person being told that everything's going to be difficult for you. Yes, making money will be difficult for you. I've been told you will not find love because you cannot do math, all sorts of things. School is school is a very difficult place for someone who only thrives in the art class. Very early on, though, again, I was very lucky to have younger people, or even like people a little bit older than me in a college setting, who were pursuing the arts very feverishly. I was part of a youth theatre festival called Thespo, and everybody I met there was a motivated young person who was pursuing something that they believed in at 18, at 25, at 30, and then made a huge impression on me to be able to gather life skills. Anybody who's worked in any kind of art festival as a young person will be told that very early on you learn how to manage resources. You learn how to articulate yourself, because you have to constantly tell people that this is a life path that you are choosing. That yes, my career and my bills are paid by my hobbies, even so, after 20 odd years. So my life started as a lighting designer. Very soon I decided as a teenager I didn't want to be on stage. So I was doing all sorts of things backstage. And by the time I graduated, and I always knew I wanted to be in education because I had awful teachers. I just wanted to be a better one. And so I started to teach immediately out of school. In fact, my first job came from my festival recommendation. Someone said there's someone who wants to work with children, doesn't know where to start. I got an opportunity to assist someone who was directing a play in a school. Got into trouble because I had to cut class and all of that. But went for rehearsals, got my first paycheck at 19. I then had the opportunity, because this was a time in Bombay where schooling was also changing, to train as a theatre teacher for the IB program. And so I started to, my longest sort of classroom career has been as an educator. very like between this time, so I'm thinking about 2009 to 2012, all of my life was either lighting something on the weekends, directing pieces, working with theatre, training myself more, working with young people. Also at this point, I start to work more and more with educators. A lot of my time has been spent in working with artists who want to be educators, but don't necessarily know what that landscape might look like. So I've done training, I've spent time in curriculum. All throughout this time, I have been at the forefront of a position where I have to advocate for the arts with leaders of school, with funders, with parents. And who's afraid of the arts? The IB program is afraid of the arts. The arts still remain subject 6. It's a subject that you can choose to drop. It's not compulsory. So in a country like India, every second child is dropping that subject. So if I had a kid who was wanting to do theatre, I had to do the work to say, why do you need this? And how will this help life skill build? And I can tell you that over the last 20 years now, every child who's been in my theatre class has had the ability and the agility to move between careers. They've been able to move between cities more actively. They've thrived in their personal spaces to take risks. All of it because you were put in a spot to make a play. You were put in a spot to think for yourself. So a lot of that advocacy work comes with that. At this point, I was also interested in other things. I was just generally interested in museums. So I found myself studying at the museum. I found myself with like-minded friends who liked objects. I did a lot of object theatre. I completely almost left doing anything with grown-up actors theatre. And I do all sorts of things. I have a little pop-up museum that I now run with friends. I make theatre for young people. I spend a lot of time just thinking about why is it that if I put a ball of dough in front of a 5-year-old, why is it that they will look? And then my advocacy work continues because why should 5-year-olds who have very basic needs of food and sleep need art? The question is, why not? Why should a 3-year-old not be exposed to something that is thought about, something that might be quiet and beautiful and colorful, or anything really, doesn't even have to be colorful. Then my life continues. I continue to be an educator. I've co-run a company that did a lot of work again in schools and consultancies. I've worked in festivals. I've worked in a position of creating education programs. I love Excel sheets. It's one of the things you have to keep telling artists that you want to work in a school system, you have to do paperwork. It's not fashionable, but guess what? You might have 5 people in your class and you can make a difference. I currently work, there are 2 things that I pursue. So I continue to make theatre. I facilitate a walk. I facilitate a tree walk in the city called Mumbai Overstory. And it's incredible because I've never really liked to be as an adult in a position of having to be in a performative space, but I'm more and more aware of how my background in theatre has facilitated the possibility of even doing something like that. I consider it an extension of my artistic practice. And I currently work in a position at a school where I run a little museum space, and I'm in charge of curating and finding and facilitating ways in which the community at school can engage with Indian culture. I work at the American School of Bombay, so it's a very particular community that we have. So I continue to look at the big and small, and I think that it started because I was allowed to spend a lot of time in mastering how to hold up a hand gesture. And it goes on like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ananda.
Okay. So we will get back into so 1 second. Yeah, I will leave it here. So I think we covered, I think between the 4 of us, there's all the reason why I think we kind of worked as a discussion point was, Sarah, you were talking about photography as a medium of exploring feelings before learning the skill and technique, but also like exploring emotions. Nandini, for you, it was about access to arts and, who gets to create art and who gets to see that art and which spaces should art exist in? And Sananda, you came from a space of you really enjoyed the arts, but you realized that it was non-existent for most of us. And how do we make sure that all children get access to the arts? And I think it's similar for me. I think my work and our organization's work is at the intersection of all of these. One being, access to the arts being very, very important. How do we ensure that as many children as possible get access to arts, but also just all grown, just general public as well has access to arts. So art in public spaces is also important for us. Art shouldn't remain in the gallery or shouldn't belong to only a certain elite. And also there seem to be all these categorizations of art, like what is traditional art and contemporary art and who gets access to what. So I think I'm going to get into the question part, our provocations as we discussed. Okay, so this is the 2 truths and 1 lie. You guys have to guess which is the lie in this. And then Zara, you will respond, okay? No. Yeah. So there are 2 truths and 1 lie here. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was banned for being too honest about racism and trauma. That's number 1. Number 2, Ai Weiwei, the Chinese artist and activist, was arrested and his art was destroyed for being critical of the government. Okay, that's number 2. And Shakespeare's Hamlet was once banned in the UK for promoting ghost hunting. Wow, they all seem like yeah, they all seem. Any of them sound like a lie to you? The first one was Maya Angelou's book was banned for being too honest about racism and trauma. Is it a lie? Any other guesses? Number 3 is a lie. Number 3 is a lie. Shakespeare's Hamlet was never banned.
Sure, that was the truth.
For promoting ghost hunting. Okay, so Zara, art is often seen as a space of freedom, yet many artists hesitate to push boundaries and to explore, right? Whether due to fear of failure, societal pressure, self-censorship, or limitations of training. How do we move beyond just skill and technique to embrace the full spectrum of what art in artistic expression means? And I think when you're answering, try to think a little bit about not you as an artist, practicing artist, but also you as a teacher, right? So you do both. I think it'll be lovely to bring those both up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so actually, it was never an intention to be a teacher. I was a practicing artist, and one of my professors who I absolutely loved, and she was a person in my college who I would look up to. She just called me one day and said, we need a photography professor. Would you do it? And I said, I have no idea how to do it. I have not taught. I have no formal training in teaching. I have zero idea. And she just said, just say what you know. And I said, wow, okay, this is don't know much. But she also allowed me the space to create the syllabus for the college. And I think that completely changed everything about the way that the students were interacting with photography as a medium. Because earlier, like I said, I studied in the same college, and the way that I was being taught was to study the history of past photographers. I completely changed the medium so that our classes were more about reading the language of photography. And what do I mean when I say that is essentially looking at, of course, the photographers who started it all, but then also contemporary photographers who were my friends, photographers who made a difference in my own life, looking at photo books, which again is a concept that not a lot of people outside of the photography circle even know exist, which people think that photo books are coffee table books, really, really beautiful looking books, but they're actually art objects. There's a lovely space in Bombay to go and look at those photo books, which is the Jojo Library in Shivaji Park. And I think that is one thing that if you bring a practitioner to even look at the syllabus, if you don't have that idea of bringing them into the classroom, I think it completely changes the way that the students will interact with the medium. And I think that definitely has, at least my students seem to really engage with the medium and tell me that, it's something that they want to pursue. And I think at the end of the day, that's, I think, all that a teacher can hope for. I also think that photography is a very isolating medium. And I feel like a lot of times in the beginning, it might seem very lovely and fun to be by yourself. But I think that I have had the privilege to be a part of a photo collective known as 830. And in fact, one of my members is sitting right there at the back. And I think that sense of community has also changed the way that I see photography. And so if we could build that sense of community like, you do and you promote as well, I think that will also help kind of, let go of this fear a little bit and let go of because even as someone who's been in photography since, I would say 7 years, I still feel a sense of fear. And at the end of the day, I message Divya frantically asking her, hey, is this photograph good enough? And it's just the thought of having someone there. And then in my case, having 8 other women there. So I think building that sense of community in a classroom also really helps in that sense.
Overcome
that fear.
And also I think, so just to probe a little bit more that question, this idea that why is it that artists are hesitating to push? Or do you feel that? Do you feel that artists who are in your circles, what could, I know that there are so many reasons, right? One is, of course, we have censorship of like overall at a society level, but then there's a lot of self-censorship, right? Like a lot of times we make art and then we're like, it's not good enough, right? And I think one of the answers you have is great, which is community. You send it to a few friends and then you get that little bit of comfort. And then you think, okay, yeah, it's not that bad. I can put this out in the world. But what are the other, what can artists do to kind of overcome that? To say that, look, okay, my art is sort of good enough to be taken out. Outside of community, of course, which I think is really, really important.
Right. I think it also, I feel like it's a bit of a tricky question because a lot of times it comes from the self-confidence is equal to being able to put your art out there, because I feel like you need a lot of confidence to showcase that vulnerability. And I think why people are not doing it, I think I'd be more equipped to answer that, is I think that gallery spaces and the art world and even the photo world, they're looking at trends. And trends are very, very big in the art world. Now, we have to kind of be able to be in a position where we can say, you know what, I don't want to follow that trend and I want to keep going. I want to keep doing what I do for a consistent period of time, like years, I would say. And it's something that I've learned from being mentored by Dayanita Singh, a really incredible photographer, who says that everything lies in the archive. So you have years and years and years and years of it, and eventually that archive is going to save your back. So I think it's just to keep at doing it consistently and also being a little, get that confidence of saying, you know what, I don't want to follow the trend and I want to go out there. And I see these trends coming in waves, and there's a trend even now, and I feel like even just the way you display an exhibition, I feel like exhibition display is like, I don't want to say, lots of people will cancel me, but basically, yeah, who's afraid of the arts? Yeah. But no, I just mean that in terms of even just the way you're displaying your work is a trend. And I feel like if we are exposed, if we're looking at art that's not only from the now, but from ages ago, and just see what sparks it in us. And if we're being honest, I feel like we can overcome it. I feel like the honesty needs to be a part of it to be able to overcome it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think thank you. One is, of course, community, then honesty, the archive, and not falling into this trap of the trends, right? Okay, next, truth and lie. Okay, what is it? Yeah. Okay. 2 truths and 1 lie. In the early 20th century, women were not allowed to enroll in most major art schools. Okay, that's the first one. Second one, street art was considered illegal in most major cities and is now widely accepted as a form of public art. And street art, I mean more graffiti. Yeah. Third, every school in India has mandatory fine arts education.
Yeah.
It's very easy, no? It's too easy. Okay, fine. So yeah, I think that's the lie that every school does not have. Okay, so Nandini, this question is for you. Access to the arts and arts education remains deeply unequal. Who gets to engage with it? Who gets to create it? Who gets to learn it? And in what forms? So since you have established Nazaria, I think I want you to talk from the organization's point of view. How can arts organizations, institutions, collectives, how can they serve marginalized communities better and make the art world more inclusive? And maybe you can share your journey also, like how you started it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big, big question. I mean, there's obviously this just general truth of our world in that, like, poor kids get poor education. And I think that reality becomes much more grim and exacerbated when we think about arts, which is already at the fringes of curriculum, as you've said, even in, like, elite fancy schools, right? And I also want to push ourselves further, not just thinking about access, but also thinking about, like, what constitutes access and what kind of art are we talking about. Not at all to take away from how incredible all forms of art are, including a kid having a paper and a pencil and being asked to sketch something in front of them. That's exceptional, and that every child deserves access to that. But also then we get scared, then it kind of stops there, right? The time I've spent working at NGOs or teaching at government schools, arts education often would either be visual arts or it would be performing arts, both of which are incredible and necessary and vital. But suddenly when you start to talk about, like, media arts, which requires slightly more investment and time and resources, that's like, inko kyun chahiye? And then if you start to talk about photography, it's like, mobile phones, hai na? But the idea that a kid from a basti can also learn how to work with industry level equipment and thrive in it is where we don't push ourselves. So I think what I feel we need more as arts organizations is to also think about, like, what kind of arts education are we enabling? What kinds of arts education is important for young people today? Media is, like, an incredibly profound part of young people's lives today. I think we have, like, some billion number of, like, reels being circulated and made in this country on a daily basis. And so I think the nudge is to, like, really try to, like, tap into what young people and children care about and have arts be responsive to those needs. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is for any child or any human being to be able to create, it's like a requisite is for them to feel safe. And so I think until and unless a child or any of us feel, like, safe, it's very hard to create and be vulnerable and be courageous. And so at Nazaria, the first thing we did before we thought about curriculum and program or resources was we were like, we need a third space. For many of the children and the young people we work with, neither home nor school are spaces where they feel safe on a physical realm, on a mental, emotional realm. And so to have a physical space where they feel that they can just be, that for us has always been the first step. And so just the function of, like, third spaces, and it doesn't always have to be an infrastructure, but I just think, like, safety and well-being, I think, are an incredible part of arts education that we ought to be talking about much more. We often speak about how arts can enable socio-emotional learning, but for even arts to begin as a process, I think it's important for a lot of that work to happen for young people. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I have a little bit of, I wanted to add, because the first point you made about, visual art and performing art is something that children do get access to, even at schools that don't have that kind of infrastructure. And, when it comes to media, especially because I also work in photography and film, I'm constantly raising money for it. And I wanted to share this anecdote when I was pitching this proposal to an American company. I'm not going to name the company, but the question, and these are all like senior professionals of the CSR department of the company. They're like, but if you give these children phones and cameras, they can't afford it. And then when they go back home, they're not going to have access. So aren't you like giving them something that they can't afford? And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, all your children at home have devices. They have all, every child now has a phone in their hand. And it's without question now that if you're a teenager, you have a mobile phone if you come from a upper middle class home. But still somehow that question will come up when it's for a child from a different socioeconomic background. So made me so angry. But then at that point, you're like, okay, I have to justify this somehow to them and say, no, you know what? They're not going to pick up any bad habits because the fear is that, they get the mobile phone and then there's the internet and what all. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely this thing of like when you want to give more people access to technology, especially when in media, I think it's also the mentality, right? Like it should not come from a place of power. And I think that's something I want you to talk a little bit about, is because you are obviously coming from a place of like wanting to help groups of children. How do you kind of disassociate this sense of like the power dynamics of it? How do you ensure that while of course we all go in as educators, right? But how do we ensure that there's a balance of power in that classroom space or in that community space this third space that you've created, where children truly feel free to create art the way they want to?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a journey for us. I think the first is just very simple, but it can do a lot in how we identify ourselves in a given space, right? So we don't call ourselves like teachers or instructors. We're like facilitators at most, and over time we're trying to emerge as like co-creators. We never refer to the young people we work with as students or learners. We talk to them as artists and kalakars. And so when you're 15 years old and you're exploring a medium for the first time and you're called an artist, you may have a long way to go, but they were called an artist 3 years ago when they began their journey, and they're called an artist today when they're actually creating art that's going around the world, right? So I think the first is to like think about the language we use in a given space to identify. And I think that's the first way of, at least in a very superficial way, trying to equalize power in the space. The second is we really believe in like co-creating. So often we consult the young people we work with as to like what they want to learn and how they want to learn it. Our curriculum is not made up of objectives or like things to do. It's made up of guiding questions. So if you look at any of our workbooks, other than some of the basic, like, I guess, principles or fundamentals of things we have to teach, it's mostly led with questions and inquiries. And then we keep a lot of open space. Even our workbooks, there's just like lots of empty space for kids to like make meaning. And so I think through those small interventions at an instructional and a pedagogical level, we do that. And then finally, I'd just say is that the reason we focus on social justice is for this very reason. So we have one of the first things we do in Pehchan is have kids draw up their identity wheel. And then we also do the identity wheel. And then we're honest about like our intersecting identities of privilege. And finally, we're in a place where we're trying to get our youth artists to lead this work. So what we think we're trying to build is a movement, and there are many movements, and hopefully it's part of much larger movement, which we all are part of, in that we want them to lead it. So the space that we've been running for 2 years, this third year, essentially our youth artists are emerging as coordinators and facilitators, and they are going to lead the space. So we essentially want to become redundant and have them kind of lead their own art practice for their communities.
Awesome. Yeah, I think some one of the things that we also do is try to ensure that the senior students learn, they start teaching photography to the younger students. So it's a great goal. Okay. I'm just time check. It's 5 o'clock. We'll try to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes. So just letting you guys know there's coffee and snacks, I think, at the back. Okay. This is the last 2 truths, 1 lie. Vincent van Gogh sold only 1 painting in his lifetime and died poor. J.K. Rowling was a struggling single mother on welfare before Harry Potter made her one of the world's richest authors. Third, Banksy has never made any money from his art. Yeah. Easy ones. I made it easy. Yeah? Okay, cool. So, Sananda, there is a persistent fear that pursuing the arts is financially unsustainable, right? Yet we see countless examples of artists, especially in a city like this, Bombay, who've built thriving careers in the arts. How do we challenge this perception? And what role can arts education and the educator play in changing this narrative? And I think we discussed this already, right? So it'll be great to hear your thoughts now.
Right, I'm going to start with a story. I think I must have been 9. You know how art class always has a theme and everybody has to do the same thing. Ours was the balloon seller. So I made a balloon seller and we were just exploring water paints at that time. So I thought I made the most wonderfully grey Mumbai monsoon sky and a lone balloon seller. I got an E. Why? I got an E because the teacher said, there are no children. And I said, yes, because they're not allowed to come out because it's about to rain. We need, and I, hated on that teacher for a while, but when I became an educator and I started to work with educators, the need that I have realized is that we need to empower educators in the classroom to be able to articulate for themselves why they need the arts, for the classroom that they facilitate, and then be able to hold space for that child who expresses themselves. Most of the time, it's just that you have an adult in the classroom who doesn't have the know-hows of the questions that you're mentioning. Like, you don't know what is a good question to ask. And I think that at a level of leadership, funding, design, it all needs support to articulate, because it is difficult to articulate what the learnings are from an arts class. It's difficult to create a rubric and it's difficult to create a template to say these are the sort of checkpoints of what it is, because then it will always remain in technique. It never goes to the beyond part of things, right? And so I've spent a substantial time in sort of advocating how you even need newer measures. You need all of the in-betweens when you talk about what is it that a child is learning in this art classroom beyond technique. How to look at the world. Why is it that if you are taught to observe the world very carefully, you look at everything. You look at that somebody might in your own peer group look like they're just a little bit disheveled for a little bit. And I bring this example all the time, that with school leaders especially, because it is, I think we are still articulating the need for art in a traditional way for self-expression, right? Yes, there's self-expression, but there's also community expression, there's also resistance, and there's also technology. Like, I was having this conversation with the head of school, trying to explain to them that if we're gonna move into a place which is all about intuitive technology, but if a human being has not had enough time to understand other characters, how is it that you're going to be intuitive about what a community needs? You know what's a great way of learning what other people need? A play. Do a play. Spend time playing a character who's set in a different context from you, who's much older than you. You spend so much time imagining a reality. That's what you end up doing. Those make jobs. All those funny, I'll bet somewhat annoying puns that you get from Zomato every now and then on push notifications, someone's writing those. It is an artistic job. Intuitive technology is all about what does the human being need, right? And right now we're in that cusp. We're talking about AI. We're afraid of it. We love it, whatever it might be. But it's about understanding human beings as a community. One of the career paths that I love giving an example of is how a lot of theatrewalas end up working in the corporate sector as trainers. You know what they train people in? They train people in looking. They train people in feeling. They train people in how is it that you might intuitively understand what your team needs, right? It's human training at some level. So I think that we do need to step back and figure out how is it that we articulate the needs for the arts. So yes, there's career. Yes, there's, opportunities that we think about. But I think we need something beyond technique. We need something beyond immediate skill to be able to articulate it. Because otherwise, it's not that teacher's fault who says that you didn't make any children in the balloon cellar, right? It's just that nothing in their training, not even a workshop in their training, in their whole life of being in school and then becoming an art teacher, has put them in a position to think that, oh, I might have to ask a question back to a child and not just look at technique and a template. So, yeah, I think the nuts and bolts is... So I often feel like we are 3 steps ahead, 1 step back always when we're talking about, things like, oh, we all have a smartphone. I work in a community where it's a very wealthy community of children who have the best phones. We can use none of their photographs after the trips. I think that's one of the big things. It's like, how is it that they're all taking really bad photos with very good phones? But again, because we haven't probably had that moment to look. And I keep insisting that all arts training, no matter if it's theatre, if it's visual art, if it's movement, dancing, we have to learn to look. One of the big crises we have right now is that we're not looking at the world around us. I'm saying curiosity is later, knowledge is later, technique is later. Just looking at the world around you will inform you of so much. But looking has to be taught. We have to teach how to look.
I was at actually an arts education conference just last week, and there was an amazing keynote speaker, forgetting his name, but it'll come back to me. But one of the amazing things he did in his keynote speech was talk about how we need to marry art and science. I think what's happened in our education system is that the divergence has happened a long time ago, and we've never really questioned why that divergence happened. Because there was a time when, for example, economics, social sciences were in the arts, and then they have moved into the sciences, and now there's this big gulf in the middle of art and science. Whereas actually, if you think about it, if you were to marry them, or whatever that word could be, there is just, especially in today's world with AI and all of these things coming up, if we were to kind of bring them together, I think it would put our children and our future generations up for much more success. So, what's his name? He was a botanist, by the way. And he was a Kannada writer also, so it'll come to me. But it was such a, it obviously sounds obvious that we should be teaching arts and science together to children. But I think what ends up happening is, see, we are all artists, and you are also all like creative people, and we're all just talking to each other. And same thing in that the conference that I was at, we were all art educators or institutions. Everybody else was also art teacher. There were no science teachers there. There were no math teachers there, right? So I think that we've just become so separated from the so-called, the careers that we want our children to pursue. We want them to pursue the engineering and the medicine, and we need those careers to live. But I think figure out how everything should kind of like be part of our lives. Art and science being part of our lives is important. We can't just only be doing art or only doing science. So that's something I thought I'll share. But yeah,
I want to add to that art and science 100%. Like engineering and the arts. I mean, look at this. I say this very often, but look at the city that we live in. We're just like, this entire city is being built by civil engineers who love to put switchboards in the middle of a wall. Have you got, just look around in the home spaces that you live in. You will always find this unsuspecting switchboard in the center of a wall, because nobody thinks of the people who are going to stay there. You've not for a moment thought about who's going to be here nurturing their lives and harboring their dreams and raising their children. Look at the way we sell property. We're never selling an everyday dream of a life. So we're just building these my God, it's a disgusting looking city. We just don't have a sense of the fact that we might need to...
part of the...
Yeah, oh God, 100%, yeah. That we want... We don't have design. We don't have design sensibility, because nobody in civil engineering is teaching you anything that architecture does. Right? Because that divorce also happened at some point. So you either have really beautiful homes, and otherwise you have, what we have. So it's art and science, yes, 100%. I also just want to make a point that I grew up in a home of scientists. Both my parents are microbiologists. And so I also credit their lives for just this idea of looking, because looking is a discipline for a scientist. So you know that looking is valuable. that process is valuable, that you have to spend time in doing something that will not be immediate. So yeah, just do a lot of the arts at all points. Like one of my favorite workshops to do is art with math teachers. And I do these with word problems. And I go into this whole tangent about who the word problem is about. And they're always confused by it. And it always comes down to, yes, but it will take time. But I'm like, yeah, but just imagine I'm so much more invested in it now. And I can kind of figure it out because maybe for that child in that classroom, you've managed to bring them to a certain place of imagination.
Yeah.
And then lead them on. But
the name came to me, by the way. His name is K.N. Ganeshaya. Please do look him up. He's amazing. See if you can find him on YouTube. Anyway. So I think now is a good time to just open it up for any questions that you might have for any of us, or any comments or suggestions, anything at all before we break for the evening. Do we have any questions? Yes? Do you want?
yes,
Yeah, maybe her first and then maybe you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks so much for such a interesting panel discussion. Very, very insightful. So we're all part of a foundation based out of Pune called the Arisa Foundation. And the full form of it is Advancement in Research in the Sciences and Arts. So we work at the intersection of art and science. Thank you for that, because we feel very validated right now, especially with the last point. We're very new. We're only a year and a half old. We're struggling with, being a startup NGO, trying to find funding for this, trying to advocate for the arts. I'm sure everyone here has probably gone through some version of that journey. And I guess my question is both a comment and a question. What I've noticed with working with undergrads and high schoolers is art is looked at as an extracurricular activity that supports their career aspirations for, let's say, I want to go to this really cool Ivy League university in the US, and having arts in my CV for my engineering undergrad is going to look great. But I think I've never come across anyone who's like, I want to do performing arts, and having engineering as my extracurricular activity is going to be really great on my application. So I feel that's one disconnect that I see in general in our education system as a whole. And the other, more of a question I would ask everyone. So by background, I'm a neuroscientist, and I look at the neuroscience of art and aesthetic expression and experiences. And the question that I kind of always ask or think about is what would give the arts more credibility? And even saying that maybe the science would, give arts the credibility is kind of putting science on a higher ground. But is that something that you feel would be helpful in terms of, hey, there's more data to support that the arts actually have big impact in day-to-day life, and that's why it should get funded? Is that something that you think would add credibility to the arts? Anyone can answer, just a question.
I'll just add one point, and then Sananda, I think you're ready. I think that definitely there needs to be more lobbying for the arts. And I'll give you an example of this Arts Council in the UK. I mean, it's sadly now, I think all arts councils are in their decline. But for the longest time, they were funded by the government, and they would do a lot of research, public funded research on the benefits of arts at the primary level, middle school, and also the creative industries. And I think they had some really large number in the billions of pounds of how much the creative industry brings in terms of money into the UK. Film production, theatre, all these, what do you call that? Like what you have in Broadway, there's an equivalent of that in, So how much money that brings into the country. So the Creative Council was doing that research and publishing these papers. If you look it up today, also you'll find a lot of PDFs of the financial impact. And I think everybody understands money, right? As long as you say, okay, this brings X amount of money, then they get it. And this is something we at CPB also try to do. We try to find ways of saying, okay, if you do this is X value to the child. There are all these 30 jobs available today in Chennai that if your child learns, photography and filmmaking, they can enter these 20 careers and they can earn X thousands or lakhs in a year. So that correlation has to be made. And I think that's something that if you want to do that, I think that's a good way to start. People understand that. But yeah, that's my point.
I want to say data, 100%. There needs to be a way of visualizing data for arts learning. And the other thing is we need to be able to simplify the language that we use. One of the things that I think as artists we do quite naturally. I think we just, we want to be these people, and it's nice, it's lovely. But it's really unhelpful if you're in a position of advocacy where, we say that, oh, all the wonderful things happen in the art class. So very early on in my career, I had this like, oh my God, you're so creative. Oh my God, in your classroom, kids do this. And that was actually doing my practice a disfavor. So I'm now in a position where if I have a 1-hour workshop with a group of teachers, or if I have 7 days with them, my big aim is to say, you can do it. This is not, yes, I've had tremendous amount of privilege in my own career, but I need it to be as simple as cup of noodles. I need a teacher to be able to feel like I have 2 things that I can do that is art-based, right? But you can do it. It's not exotic. It is not held on by someone who very evidently looks like me, dresses up like me, and all of that. It is that anybody can do it. And we have that, I think, is a big one. So we have to simplify language and make it accessible, and then compete with all the language in academics. So one of the things with curriculum design I've found is that use the same language that every other subject is using, and help every stakeholder, help the leadership understand it better, help the parent understand it better, help the child articulate better why they might be doing this, and find that vocabulary so that it's not this sort of foo-foo thing.
Sarah, you want to add something?
Yeah, I actually want to talk about this idea of language in the arts. And I'm also an art writer. And again, that happened. It happened. It's not something that, I was conscious about. But I feel like also when I'm reading, so how I started writing about art is also this idea of what I was feeling when I was looking at it. That's what I was writing about. And then, of course, I was bringing in the artist's perspective into it. But also, again, talking about trends, there are 5 keywords that every art writer needs to write in their art story, and I feel like they just feel like if we write those, it automatically becomes a piece that, is intellectually amazing. So I feel like even if the way that we're writing about art is that we're writing it for everyone, right? If we're writing it like it's a story, we're writing it as a sense of excitement. And I feel like if we bring that aspect into it, we're also allowing a lot more people to the access of it and not just the artists,
Actually, this is bringing me back again to Ganeshaya, who I listened to just a few days ago. And he talked about this exactly. He read a paragraph from a science paper. Some study done, something. And it was difficult to read, for a lay person. Yeah. And then he read another paragraph from some art essay, and then again difficult to read. Yeah. Both were difficult to read, right? Yeah. So I think language has become this kind of like a flex that we have in our specialized worlds. And it would be good to kind of just simplify on both ends of the spectrum. Science also can be quite complicated to read sometimes, and as can art. Do you want to ask your question now? I think there was a question here.
Yeah.
No.
I think I can just...
Yeah.
So my question is, because I work in sort of the media, mainly the podcasting space, and something that you find with the public centers, to say of the arts, is that I feel like in many ways the audience is also afraid of art in terms of how we engage with it. Because I see some of the most expensive art making, whether it's in film, whether it's out there, anything, it's happening on platforms like YouTube and like that, where engaging with the art is essentially free. But if you look at where you have to pay to engage the art, usually that's where it's the safe, conventional kind of content that you find. So I just wanted to ask, how do we get the audience to engage with art in a way that, in that financial way, so we can encourage artists to enter that mainstream space a bit more?
I have no answer. I mean, I literally have no answer because it's something we struggle with. We are a non-profit organization, so on every spectrum of it, we are raising money all the time. If it's for an exhibition, we are raising funding. If it's for an education program, we are raising money. if it's for a grant, or I mean, it's nobody's ever just come to us and say, hey, you know what, I have lots of money, just do what you want to do with it, right? So I think that arts funding is difficult, but I think your question is more about this subscription model, or like you're coming from that podcasting world, right? Now, I actually subscribe to a lot of podcasts, and I do give money to people. So I think that's a really good space to be in if you're creating good content. If you're giving out your previews or some free content and then saying, okay, if you like this, subscribe for more. I think that's been working. I think a lot of news channels are doing it. Podcasters are doing it. So I think this is people are looking for good content, and people, from what I understand, people are willing to pay. But please feel free to correct me on this, or if anybody else you want to add something? Yeah.
I think I have a couple of points, like a couple about what Kohinoor said as well, and what we just talked about. I think something as simple as documentaries, right? I want to ask everyone a question. How many of you have started watching documentaries after Netflix? After Netflix.
Are you asking the audience?
Yeah,
okay,
everyone.
yeah. How many of you have started watching documentaries after Netflix?
Before also. Okay.
Before also. Yeah, I think there are some people, yeah.
Yeah, I think the accessibility, I think language is a major part of the answer. How we can get audiences to, pay. I think one of the things is also how artists are thinking about it, right? For example, I remember walking out of a dance performance with a non-artist, non-dancer friend who said, okay, but why was this not ticketed? So there is definitely, as you said, willingness to pay. The artists themselves need to believe that, my art is worth getting paid for. That's one. And I think, we just talked about marrying art and science. So I just wanted to add in a little perspective about marrying art, science, and business. Because I think that doesn't happen often. We do not, we want to keep things, gatekeep things, and call it exclusive, especially in the class. I'm a classical dancer, so that's the space I'm coming from. Also, I think in terms of spaces, right, I absolutely love this space, but we are talking about public schools, we are talking about art education, maybe next time we could do this in a public school. That would be amazing. And instead of looking at it as art education, maybe it's time to look at education through arts and arts through education,
yes.
Both the ways. And I think that will shift a lot of things, hopefully. So, yeah, just wanted to share a couple of thoughts there.
Does anybody want to add or respond to
No,
that?
I just want to respond to saying that, ticketing shows, ticketing everything at a basic, this one, I end up working with a lot of museums, and this is always a thing. Museums are public bodies, but they never want to ticket things. And I think that just, again, showing up to something, making a commitment, you can have subscription and scholarships available, but you have to put a price on it. I know that in Bombay, we've always had to pay for theatre, but I know that Bombay shows, when they travel to Delhi, it's just confusing for people that they have to pay for tickets. What does that mean? Passes nahi hai? Nahi. Right? So, yeah, starts with that. And there's
Nandini wants to respond.
Yeah, I just also want to respond to the thing you said about arts education not being seen in a silo. I can't remember the name of the report, but you can just search the top, I think it's 20 skills that young people need in the 21st, but also 22nd century, of which creative thinking is one of them, right? It's almost moving away from these subject-based learning modules to thinking about what kinds of skills which are extremely interdisciplinary that young people and we all need today to be able to thrive in the world and in the workplace, right? And I think if we look at it from that lens, and it becomes less a conversation about arts education, but what's redundant and what's relevant in terms of where we're heading today. In our film program, we termed it as a film program. A mentor of ours came and visited, and she was like, this is not just a film program. There were kids who were working as producers, who were doing budgeting, those who were working as gaffers with understanding concepts of physics while learning about light, right? So I think if we can start to design our programs that actually look at how these three things intersect, and not just three, many more, Yeah, I think that's just also part of like reinventing what constitutes like knowledge.
Okay,
That's
we
amazing.
have
Thank you so
last question now, and after this conversation, you can ask the questions directly, in the coffee. Yeah. Okay.
Just wanted to take on from, arts and education and arts. Actually, I work in a very privileged school in South Bombay, where we are looking like when we are teaching humanities also, it's called IHA, which is Integrated Humanities and Arts. We're looking at contemporary issues. I also look at community service learning, and we had Nazaria also, the artists at Nazaria come to our school, talk about the films, have an interaction with our kids. And I totally like get it what Sunanda is saying, that, despite the technology, despite the access, the kids, the work that children sometimes produce is like not up to the mark. But sometimes I always wonder that why is it that, it's integrated in some ways, even in these privileged schools, but it's it's just by the way, like arts while it is still interdisciplinary, the IB uses these terms. But again, it is not like, it's not integrated in, say, English as much as it could be, or, like it's not integrated perhaps in like the science when we are perhaps looking at photography, right? So why is that not happening, and what work needs to be done? Or even social justice, right? When we are looking at access and we're looking at so many of these things, I think we need more conversations and we need more teacher training into it. And I mean, like, that's just as a comment and a question as an educator that I always
It's
have.
more like a question.
Yeah.
Why?
No, I just
Why?
But I think
I don't think any of us can answer.
no, I do think we don't have enough leadership training. Look at what your leadership is being trained for. Look at what professional development money is being spent on in your institutions, and they are all technically driven. The arts require an ability to wrestle with things that are abstract and then articulate it in terms without using the word temporal. Should do a drinking game of what words are not allowed to be used for art writing. But yeah, temporal, of course, temporal, my God, temporal. But yeah, we don't have enough training. So people in positions of power in a school system, in a learning system, they don't know that how do I justify 29 hours of puppet making. I just came out of a project where we work with a CSR partner, and we have been struggling with how students engage. And our entry point was, because I run an Indian culture project, so the entry point was human animal forms from Indian myths to two-dimensional moving puppets. We spent so much time with children in empowering them to be able to understand the artistic process that they really took on to, that when they met a group of students that don't look like them, that are not from the same backgrounds as them, it didn't matter. We had the most wonderful exchange because the art became the language. But you need someone to be able to say that I need 29 hours, that I need that many arts classes for it to happen, that you can't just throw a bunch of kids together and say this is an empathy model because I looked at someone who looks different and I didn't make a face. It's not enough. So you need advocates, but you need advocates to be in a position where they can articulate, where they feel empowered, and they have some way to quantify all of this for a school. So yeah, we just don't have enough people. And it's really unfortunate. One of the high points of my career was that I was working with a huge group of artist educators, but somehow I feel like I'm still working with the same group of people that I was working with 10 years ago. That it has not necessarily grown. And that's a very difficult reality of being in Bombay, because all of what is possible for an actor in this city is so much more exciting than saying that I will still come back to the classroom and I will still do a project with children. So we just don't have enough people, but we have jobs. That's the thing. We have jobs in schools. We have states that have made funding possible. Goa, of course, like the tiniest state, which is a wonderful example, but Goa has a theatre teacher program. They have funding for a theatre teacher in every district. They have one theatre school. There are jobs to be had, but you need training, and you need to be able to say, no, don't run off to Bombay. this is also a life, this is also a possibility. So we need all of that support to be able to advocate for a life that can be meaningful, that where you can thrive and be well while continuing to be an educator and continuing to do your practice. Yeah. Training, and more training.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, on that note, we will close. Snigdha, do you want to make any announcements or can we just wrap it up?
I mean, thank you so much, guys, and thank you, ladies. Like, this was amazing, and I honestly, for me, like, I'm a business person, and I agree with you. Like, doing partnerships with like a Biennale, most of the times, I'm answering questions like, "What is a Biennale? Why are they doing? Oh, they do it in public places. What kind of?" But one thing that I do want to say is that it is true. The way that the world consumes content is so different now, that the more engaging you make any topic, from a visual standpoint, from a video standpoint, it is bound to get interest, right? Like, and especially the Netflix question. Sorry, I don't remember who asked. You did, right? I thought it was a great question because I'm somebody who watches like Herzog documentaries, right? And nobody knew about it until Cave of Forgotten Dreams came on Netflix, and they're like, "Oh, have you seen this?" And I'm like, "Yes," in 2010 when I was in college. But thank you so much, guys. Like, really appreciate you. And Gayatri, thank you so much for organizing. I mean, she was the brains behind the panel. There's some coffee and snacks on the back. And obviously, yes, please feel free to interact with the panel and everyone. And thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
I want to make one final announcement. Okay, the Chennai photo Biennale is still on.
Yes, the Biennale is still, I'll do it.
So please do visit.
Yeah.
They're not very far away.
Yeah.
Very direct flight and trains.
Yeah. It's on till the 16th of March, and it looks amazing. So please, please, please go and visit the Biennale.
2 apps left, so we want to grab us some review time. Visit. Thank you.